Close your eyes and allow your breathing to slow naturally without effort as the weight of the day begins to fade and the edges of your thoughts soften, drifting away from urgency and expectation. There is nothing you need to follow closely, nothing you need to remember, only a calm voice and a gentle movement backward through time, carrying you far from the present moment. Let me take you back to ancient Rome, not the Rome of grand speeches and sudden battles, but a Rome that exists quietly between moments, unfolding slowly beneath an open sky, shaped by routine, habit, and the steady passage of days. 2,000 years ago, long before the modern world took shape, this city stood at the center of a growing civilization, unaware of how deeply it would one day influence the future. The year is 50 before the Common Era. Morning light spreads gradually across the 7 hills of Rome, touching stone walls warmed by centuries of sun, tiled rooftops darkened by age, and narrow streets carved by countless footsteps moving in familiar patterns. The city awakens without haste, guided not by clocks or schedules, but by the rising sun and the simple rhythm of daily life. Smoke lifts gently from small household fires as families prepare their first meal of the day. Water flows steadily through fountains, its sound echoing softly between buildings. Merchants open wooden shutters and arrange their goods in quiet concentration, while guards along the city walls exchange calm glances as one watch ends and another begins. Rome does not rush. It has learned patience through centuries of survival. This is a city built layer upon layer, each generation resting upon the foundations of the last, carrying forward traditions, beliefs, and stories that shape the lives of those who walk its streets. Every stone beneath your feet has been touched by time, worn smooth by movement, marked by memory. As you move slowly through this imagined morning, you begin to sense the vastness of Rome, not in its size alone, but in its continuity. Life here follows patterns refined over generations, guided by customs that feel as natural as breathing. People rise, work, speak, eat, and rest in a rhythm so familiar that it requires no thought. At the heart of the city lies the Forum, already stirring with quiet activity. Columns rise toward the sky, their surfaces softened by age, while statues of gods and ancestors stand in silent watch, witnessing another day begin much like the last. Voices remain low, unhurried, blending into a gentle hum that carries across open spaces and down shaded paths. Beyond the Forum, Rome stretches outward in all directions, its neighborhoods connected by winding roads that lead to farms, rivers, and distant provinces. The city feels alive, not in excitement, but in steadiness, in the assurance that today will follow a familiar path. This Rome has known hardship and triumph, fear and celebration, yet in this moment it simply exists, balanced between what has already passed and what has yet to come. To understand Rome, one must first understand its patience. For centuries before this quiet morning, Rome was shaped by struggle, by adaptation, and by the slow building of identity. Long before emperors and marble palaces, Rome was a small settlement beside the river Tiber, vulnerable to floods, invasion, and uncertainty. Survival demanded cooperation, discipline, and resilience, qualities that became woven into Roman character. Over time, these traits transformed a village into a city, and a city into a power whose influence spread steadily across the Italian peninsula. Rome learned to absorb other cultures, to adapt their customs, and to reshape them into something distinctly Roman. This ability to blend strength with flexibility allowed Rome to endure when others faded. Yet even as Rome grew stronger, it remained deeply aware of balance. The memory of kings lingered in the collective mind, reminding citizens of the danger of unchecked power. Authority, they believed, must be shared, restrained, and earned. It was this belief that gave rise to the Roman Republic, a system built not on perfection, but on cautious trust in structure and tradition. Offices were temporary, responsibilities divided, and laws debated endlessly in an effort to prevent tyranny. On this quiet morning, those debates are distant echoes, carried forward by habit rather than urgency. Rome feels stable, grounded in systems that have endured long enough to feel permanent. But beneath this calm surface, history continues its slow movement. Ambition stirs quietly in certain hearts. Inequality grows in subtle ways. The balance that holds Rome steady requires constant care, and even the strongest structures are shaped by time. For now, though, Rome rests in the present. As the sun climbs higher, shadows shorten, and the city settles fully into the day, you can allow yourself to drift with it, carried by the same steady rhythm that guides life here. There is nothing sudden ahead, only a gradual unfolding of stories shaped by human hands and quiet choices. This is where our journey begins, in a Rome that feels timeless, unaware of how much change lies ahead, moving forward one calm day at a time. As the morning continues to unfold across the city and Rome settles fully into the rhythm of the day, it becomes easier to sense how deeply the past lives within these streets, shaping every custom, every law, and every quiet expectation that guides the people who call this place home. Long before this moment in 50 BC, Rome was still discovering what it meant to govern itself. In its earliest centuries, Rome was ruled by kings, figures whose authority was unquestioned and whose decisions reached into every corner of public and private life. For a time, this system provided stability, but over generations, resentment grew among those who felt that too much power rested in the hands of too few. The memory of these kings would linger for centuries, becoming a quiet warning passed down through stories and tradition, reminding Romans of the danger of allowing any single individual to stand too far above the law. In the year 509 BC, that memory became action as the Roman monarchy was overthrown and replaced by a new and untested system known as the Roman Republic. This was not a sudden leap toward freedom, but a careful experiment shaped by fear of tyranny and hope for balance. Power was divided deliberately, broken into parts designed to limit ambition and prevent domination. Two consuls were elected each year to govern together, each able to restrain the other. Their terms were short, ensuring that authority remained temporary and accountable. Alongside them stood the Senate, a council of elder statesmen whose influence rested not on force, but on tradition, experience, and continuity. Though the Senate could not pass laws on its own, its guidance shaped nearly every major decision, weaving stability into Rome's political fabric. Citizens gathered in assemblies to vote on laws, elect officials, and debate matters of importance, creating the sense that Rome belonged not to one ruler, but to its people as a whole. This system was imperfect and often slow, yet it reflected a deeply Roman belief that power, when shared and restrained, could endure longer than power seized by force. As the Republic took shape, Rome began to expand beyond its original boundaries, first securing control over nearby territories, then extending its influence across much of the Italian peninsula. Through a combination of military discipline, strategic alliances, and an unusual willingness to grant partial citizenship to conquered peoples, Rome grew steadily stronger. Each victory brought new land, new wealth, and new responsibilities. Roads stretched outward from the city, connecting Rome to distant towns and farms, binding them together through trade, communication, and shared defense. Yet expansion carried consequences that unfolded slowly, almost unnoticed at first. Wealth flowed unevenly into Rome, enriching some families while leaving others behind. Veterans returned from war to find their farms neglected or claimed by larger estates, while political competition intensified among those seeking influence. The Republic, built on balance, began to feel the strain of its own success. Within the Senate, rivalries sharpened and loyalty shifted from the state itself toward powerful individuals who promised protection, rewards, or reform. Public offices, once seen as duties, increasingly became tools for personal advancement. Still, Rome endured. Its institutions adapted, absorbing pressure through compromise and tradition, guided by a collective belief that the Republic represented something greater than any one person. Laws were revised, offices redefined, and customs reinforced, all in an effort to preserve stability. To an observer walking through Rome during this time, the Republic might appear solid and unshakable, its systems woven so deeply into daily life that they felt permanent. Debates in the Forum followed familiar patterns. Elections came and went. Magistrates served their terms and stepped aside. And yet, beneath this surface of order, change moved quietly. Ambition did not announce itself loudly. It grew gradually, fed by opportunity, inequality, and the desire for lasting influence. The Republic's strength, its openness and flexibility, also made it vulnerable to those who learned how to navigate its rules with exceptional skill. Rome stood at a delicate point in its long history, balanced between tradition and transformation, unaware that the careful system it had built was approaching a moment of profound change. For now, though, the Republic continued, guided by routine, habit, and the belief that it would endure as it always had. As the sun climbs higher over the city, casting shorter shadows across stone streets and public squares, the life of Rome flows forward, steady and unhurried, carrying within it the quiet momentum of history itself. As the Roman Republic moved forward through the centuries, its traditions remained outwardly familiar, yet beneath the surface, the balance it depended upon was slowly shifting, shaped by ambition, opportunity, and the growing reach of Roman power far beyond the city itself. By the first century before the Common Era, Rome had become the center of an enormous network of provinces, armies, and resources, all flowing back toward the city along roads worn smooth by constant travel. With this expansion came immense wealth, but also deep inequality, as power increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few influential families. It was within this changing world that Julius Caesar rose. Born into an old but relatively modest noble family, Caesar distinguished himself not through inheritance alone, but through charisma, military skill, and a keen understanding of how Roman politics truly worked. He spoke to the people with confidence and clarity, presenting himself as both a servant of the Republic and a champion of reform. His military campaigns, particularly in Gaul, brought him extraordinary success. Year after year, his victories expanded Rome's territory while earning him the unwavering loyalty of his soldiers, men who trusted him not only as a commander, but as a leader who shared their hardships and rewards. As Caesar's fame grew, so did concern among Rome's political elite. The Republic had always feared the rise of any individual who commanded too much loyalty, especially from the army, which traditionally served the state rather than a single man. Tension built gradually, expressed through speeches, laws, and political maneuvering, until it reached a quiet but decisive moment when Caesar was ordered to surrender his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. Instead, he crossed the Rubicon River. This act, simple in appearance, carried enormous meaning. By leading his army into Italy, Caesar openly defied the authority of the Senate and challenged the very foundation of the Republic. Civil war followed, not as a sudden explosion, but as a series of campaigns that drew Rome into conflict with itself. Cities changed hands, alliances shifted, families found themselves divided by loyalty and a fear. Through it all, Caesar remained calm and methodical, advancing steadily until his rivals were defeated and resistance faded. Victorious, Caesar returned to Rome and assumed a level of authority unseen in a republic's long history. He introduced reforms aimed at stabilizing society, reducing debt, reorganizing the calendar, and expanding citizenship. To many, he appeared as a restorer of order in a time of chaos, yet his power unsettled those who believed deeply in the Republic's traditions. The concentration of authority in a single individual, no matter how capable, felt like a return to monarchy, a system Rome had rejected centuries earlier. In 44 BC, a group of senators acted on this fear, assassinating Caesar in the belief that removing him would restore the Republic. Instead, his death plunged Rome into renewed turmoil as factions struggled once more for control. Out of this prolonged conflict emerged Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, a figure less dramatic in manner but equally determined. Through patience, strategy, and careful presentation, Octavian consolidated power while maintaining the appearance of republican tradition. When he became known as Augustus, Rome entered a new era. The Republic, though preserved in name, quietly gave way to the Roman Empire. Power now rested firmly with the emperor, yet stability returned. And after decades of unrest, the city found peace and routine once more. This period, later called the Pax Romana, brought relative calm, economic growth, and a sense of continuity that allowed daily life to proceed without constant fear of conflict. Rome had changed, but it did not feel chaotic. The transformation from republic to empire was not marked by a single dramatic moment, but by a gradual shift, accepted over time as people adapted to a new understanding of authority and order. As the city settled into this new rhythm, life continued much as it always had, guided by habit, tradition, and the steady passage of days, even as the world beneath those habits had been quietly reshaped. With the great shifts of power now resting quietly in the background, it becomes easier to turn away from emperors and politics and instead focus on the gentle, repeating patterns that shape the everyday lives of most people in ancient Rome. For the majority of Romans, life was defined not by grand events, but by routine. Days began early, guided by the rising sun rather than by clocks, as families stirred within their homes and the sounds of the city slowly returned. In crowded apartment buildings, known as insulae, voices, footsteps, and distant street noise blended together, creating a constant but familiar presence. These buildings rose several stories high, with the poorest residents living on the upper floors, where light was scarce and water had to be carried by hand. Wealthier citizens lived closer to the ground, or in private houses arranged around open courtyards, where sunlight, fresh air, and flowing water brought comfort to daily life. Food was simple and repetitive, centered around bread, olives, vegetables, and small portions of meat when available. Meals were shared without hurry, often eaten while standing or sitting close together, accompanied by quiet conversation and the sounds of the street outside. Public spaces played an important role in Roman life. The Forum remained a gathering place for news and trade, but perhaps no place was more central to daily routine than the public baths. Here, Romans of all backgrounds gathered to bathe, talk, and relax, moving through warm rooms, cool pools, and open courtyards in a slow, familiar rhythm. Bathhouses were not places of luxury alone, but of community, where the boundaries between public and private life softened and conversation flowed as easily as water. Children filled the streets and courtyards with movement and sound, learning through imitation and play, while adults worked in workshops, fields, and markets, contributing to the steady pulse of the city. Religion wove gently through everyday life. Small household shrines stood quietly in corners of homes, where families offered simple prayers to gods believed to watch over daily affairs. Festivals punctuated the calendar, bringing moments of shared celebration and rest. As afternoon light shifted and shadows lengthened, the pace of the city began to slow. Shops closed their shutters, tools were set aside, and families gathered once more within their homes. When night arrived, oil lamps flickered to life, casting soft pools of light across walls painted with scenes of nature and myth. Outside, streets grew quieter, and the sounds of the day faded into the background. Rome at night was a different place, calmer and more intimate, where the vastness of the city softened into something personal and familiar. Within this rhythm of work, rest, and repetition, life continued steadily, shaped less by the ambitions of rulers and more by the shared habits of ordinary people. It was in these quiet, unremarkable moments that Rome truly existed, not as an empire, but as a place where human lives unfolded day after day, guided by routine, memory, and the gentle passing of time. As centuries passed and generations came and went beneath the same familiar skies, the Roman world began to change in ways that were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to those living within it. Rome had endured hardship before, and to most people, life continued much as it always had, shaped by routine, habit, and the quiet expectation that tomorrow would resemble today. Yet beneath this surface of continuity, the foundations of the empire were slowly shifting. Rome had grown vast, stretching across continents, linking distant lands through roads, laws, and shared authority. This immense size, once a source of strength, gradually became a challenge. Managing far-flung provinces required resources, coordination, and constant attention, and over time, the balance between center and frontier grew harder to maintain. Economic strain spread quietly. Coinage lost value. Taxes increased. Trade routes that once carried goods and ideas with ease began to falter. In cities and countryside alike, people adjusted without protest, finding ways to endure as they always had. Political authority, once clear and centralized, became increasingly uncertain. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, some ruling only briefly before being replaced by rivals or soldiers who promised stability but delivered only temporary calm. Loyalty shifted from the idea of Rome itself to individual leaders, weakening the sense of shared purpose that had once bound the empire together. At the borders, pressure increased steadily. Groups from beyond the empire's frontiers moved closer, driven by their own needs, conflicts, and migrations. Some came as traders or settlers, others as raiders, and still others as refugees seeking safety within Rome's boundaries. The Roman response was not always conflict. Many were welcomed, settled, and absorbed into the empire's fabric, contributing labor, culture, and military service. Rome had always adapted by blending with others, and this flexibility remained one of its strengths. Yet the strain continued to grow. To manage its size, the empire was divided, first administratively, then politically, into eastern and western halves. The intention was stability, efficiency, and survival. The Eastern Empire, wealthier and more urbanized, continued to thrive, while the Western half, burdened by economic decline and constant pressure, weakened more visibly. Cities that had once bustled with commerce and conversation slowly grew quieter. Public buildings fell into disrepair. Roads were traveled less frequently. In some regions, local leaders assumed responsibilities once handled by imperial authority, creating smaller centers of power that focused on immediate survival rather than distant unity. Rome itself, the eternal city, remained inhabited, but its role changed. Population declined. Grand structures stood as reminders of earlier centuries, still impressive, yet increasingly disconnected from everyday life. There was no single moment when Rome fell, no final battle that ended everything at once. Instead, the empire softened and thinned, its edges fading gradually as people adapted to new realities. Life did not stop. It simply shifted into different forms. In the year 476 AD, when the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire was removed from power, the event passed quietly for many. For those living in villages and towns, daily life continued, shaped by seasons, labor, and family, just as it had the day before. Rome did not vanish overnight. Its influence lingered in laws that continued to guide communities, in roads that still connected distant places, and in language that carried Roman words into future centuries. Even as political authority faded, cultural memory endured. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving traditions, knowledge, and identity long after the West had transformed into something new. And so, the fall of Rome was not an ending in the way stories often suggest, but a long transition, a gradual passing from one world into another. As centuries unfolded, people adapted, rebuilt, and remembered, carrying fragments of Rome forward into the future, often without realizing how deeply those fragments shaped the world they lived in. Rome became less a place and more an idea, woven quietly into the foundations of new societies, guiding them in ways both visible and unseen. In this slow fading, there is no urgency, no sharp conclusion, only the steady movement of time, carrying civilizations forward just as it carries individual lives, gently and without pause.